Welcome again to the Path Podcast, the podcast that provides transformative insights for authentic success. My name is Chris Weiss, and together with my partners, Stuart Ferguson and Toby Quinton, we make up True Path Consulting, where our mission is to maximize executive performance and drive personal growth by guiding leaders on a journey of self-fulfillment and true success. Again, I want to thank you for pressing play on whatever device you're listening to us on today. It means a ton to us that you are here. Our hope is that, again, through our stories and interviews, you will find something in yourself, something that moves you to get curious and possibly something that triggers you to take action in your life. You see, the goal of this podcast and in our coaching partnerships is to help people find their ideal selves without having to have that motivation of that personal or professional crisis in their life. We will bring up topics and curate discussions like the one today that will help you take action to find out who you are showing up as in the roles that you play in your life, and ultimately helping you paint the picture of who you want to be and what's potentially getting in your way from being who you truly want to be in your life. We only get one shot at this awesome life. Let's stop being okay with being miserably comfortable. Again, a term that we'll bring up a lot and often, probably have a whole podcast on that. And instead be more intentional in following a path of meaning and purpose. With that being said, I'd love to check in more formally with the crew. Tobe, how you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing great. I'm looking forward to today's topic, and it means a lot to me from not only a personal experience, but also just working with clients and people that are on their own paths. But from a check-in perspective, we're, about ready to have the national holiday ahead, and just excited about a little bit of time with friends and family. And I'm in a good spot for sure.
You tired? Toby and I were in Dallas yesterday. We had a one-day trip in and out. I got delayed 2 hours. I didn't get home till 11:30. Did you get home okay?
Yeah, I got it right. Touch wood. I didn't have a delay, thank God.
It's just my luck.
There's no better place to find true groundedness, which we'll get into, than a delayed flight in an airport in a city you don't want to necessarily be in. Like, there's nothing, no better test of how well are you doing on the work.
I texted Joy because I was literally like, I want to cry. The last few days have been kind of crazy for me. I was on a golf trip. I did this groundedness walk, 12-hour groundedness walk. So I'm exhausted. I had to wake up early to catch my flight. I'm sitting there exhausted. I found myself at the bar enjoying a summer shanty, which I told myself I wasn't going to do. But then I'm like, what the hell am I going to? Like, I have to now. I can only have so much, dedication. And then it got delayed 2 more hours, and I literally almost cried. And so I had to go inside and really dig deep, but I made it through. I'm here now, and I'm excited to talk to you guys. Stu, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. Doing really good. I've got, I'm sure like most people, as Toby said, we got a national holiday right around the corner. And so that means I get all of my children home under one roof for the first time, with a little bit of time. I got one in college and one that graduated and is working in the real world. So what's fun is watching them all be apart for a period of time, and then they reintroduce themselves. And so there's usually chaos for the first 48 hours, and then we settle back in. So I'm in probably hour 28 of the 48. I still got 20 more to go for normalcy, but it's been awesome having them home.
That's cool.
But it's definitely, you go from an empty nest life to a house filled with children again. There's a bit of a transition there. My rules are no longer their rules. They're adults. Yeah. They want to live their life. So it's been fun.
That's cool, man. Really cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the 4th too. We're heading up to the lake, and we haven't been up there in a long time. The whole family's going up. My parents are going up. Aiden's girlfriend's actually coming up, which creates a whole new dynamic. The other boys are kind of nervous, but excited to meet her. It's kind of funny to see them interact with the whole thing. I already got asked the question, like, Dad, can we drink on 4th of July? And it's like, oh man, these parenting moments that we get put into.
Oh, totally.
But I'm just looking to unwind and sit by the lake and have a nice few days off. So should be a lot of fun. Yeah. So, well, hey, good stuff. Hey, I'm super excited about this topic. One of the things that we want to do in this podcast for the listeners is a couple things. We want to introduce topics that we talk about just on a regular basis, and this is one of them. This topic is kind of the foundation of this podcast. So, any guests that we have on, and we'll have guests on regularly when we get into the rhythm of it. One of the questions that we're going to ask and prep the guests to talk about is them doing the work. And Toby's been working with clients for over a decade now. And this is a topic that is the foundation of most of his conversations around what are you doing? The work are you doing on yourself to live the most fulfilled life that you want to live? So we asked Toby to kind of walk this topic in, and for you to kind of, the listener, to enjoy a conversation kind of with us and a journey with us as we kind of break down what the work means to us. And hopefully that resonates with them in their lives, and what they're doing to live their most fulfilled life, their most ideal life. So without being said, Tobe, you want to kind of walk in just the concept of the work, the foundation for this podcast?
Absolutely. Thanks, Chris. And as you're even just opening up this concept or this idea, I think that, though I've been a coach of leaders for over a decade now, you guys in your own right have been coaches of leaders for as long, and if not more than that time, all three of us in leadership roles that we played in corporate America. And, it's an interesting, I keep saying like concept, but it's kind of our perspective on this notion of what the work really is. And I think everybody's going to come to it at a different level and a different perspective and a different definition. But for us, and I know for myself in the work, a lot of people will say, well, Tobe, I'm working really hard. In fact, I've never worked harder in my life. And, as a coach, I'll start to just kind of like peel that back a bit and say, well, what do you mean by that? And what I find is that I do believe people are very busy with the doing part of life. The human doing, we hear that a lot, versus the human being. And so for me, as I kept working with folks and continue to work with folks, the work, and kind of air quotes, if you will, just took on it took on a definition for me that was, yes, you're working hard, but how much are you putting towards yourself? The focus on self. Many of us, that hard work is really outward. We're taking care of those that love us and that depend on us and providing what, security and comfort we can and safety. And as leaders, the responsibility of those that, report to you, and as a leader of organization in Stu's case about the strategic vision and so there's just a lot of outbound, if you will, work. So I want to honor that, as we always want to do, is like, hey, this isn't about that you're not doing enough work. But what I want to do is I want to just narrow us with the concept. And to Chris, your point, they're going to be foundational for us on every podcast we do, because it really just all roads get back to you. And it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to invest a lot of time in yourself. There's those beliefs about, am I being selfish? And if I'm actually not doing that, but I'm doing this, by definition, then I'm taking away from them and giving to me. And that's unsettling for many of us. And so the concept of the work for me is twofold. It's one about becoming more aware of ourselves in that spirit of the rearview mirror versus the windshield, paying attention to the road traveled, the path that you've taken to this point, and what do you know about yourself and what are you learning about yourself? I think that's a never-ending process, to be honest, but it's it can be one of interest and excitement, as much as, some scary moments and some things that you're unearthing that you may be buried and you didn't want to touch. And so that's part of it. But when I say, are you doing the work? That's one part of the swing. And then the second part of the swing is then where are you headed? Then the windshield comes into play. And do you have a vision for yourself? And do you know where you want to go with this life? And I always say, Chris, and Stu as well, in our work together, the roles that matter to you most, do you have an idea or a vision of how you'd want those to show up and become, and who you want to be in those roles that matter most? And it's an exercise that I know you guys have done with me and I've done with many people, of just try to walk that backwards from the end game of what would it look like if you were the father you wanted to be, if you were the son you wanted to be, the friend, and so on and so forth. So, the work is all that it takes in there to become more and more aware and be a bit of a student of the journey and the path you've taken. And also become a student, and from a creative side, that vision of who do I want to be when I grow up? So, those are the concepts that I've come up with in terms of just, when I think about, the work, when I ask people that's what I really mean. So, and again, I've had the benefit of being friends with you guys, working with you in different levels and capacities and whatnot. So I'd love to get your guys' feel and thoughts of this, this idea of the work. What does it mean to you? So Stu, I'd love to hear from you, and then definitely hear from Chris.
Such a great setup on multiple levels. when we were talking about doing this podcast, one of the first things I did was I started to reflect back on what that meant for me, and how the definition of doing the work has changed quite a bit throughout different periods of my life. And, I understood purpose early on in my life. I understood the need to do self-development type work. I got it. It was, through the organization that we work through, and being exposed to people like Dr. Les that we referenced on our last podcast, and Dr. Courier and gentlemen like that, I was infatuated with the curiosity of the ideal self. And so I got super excited about it at a young age. It connected a lot of mysteries as a young man on where some of those anxieties, some of those insecurities were coming from. I didn't understand in my 20s necessarily. So people exposing me to what the work, per se, in air quotes, was this self-discovery journey that, I had a lot of people walking with me on that road. But you said something really profound. I just want to come back to it because I think it resonates probably more with me at this age than it did when I was younger. A large part of the work for me was defining the past, was all of the rights and wrongs of my experience up until that point. I really thought that by doing the work was understanding others' impacts on me, right? It was, like you said, the external world and all of the pain or challenges that they created, right? And so early on, I thought the work was understanding others and understanding the behavior of others. But to your point, and probably the most profound part of the whole thing was there came an age where I realized it has nothing to do with these people outside of me. It has to do with that narrative that I have for myself on who I am. And, in the ownership that it takes, to begin the true work and the true path is that, to me, it's about that belief in self, right? And really authentically loving, all that comes with that individual, with you, right? And there's a couple of quotes that came to mind when I was thinking about this. I just want to share this one. And it's from Carl Rogers. And the curious paradox is that when I accept myself as I am, then I can change. Like the thought of trying to put the concept of change in front of doing the work, it won't happen. It doesn't manifest the same way. And so really taking that inside look and what I'll just say for me very quickly is I've had a lot of different versions of doing the work. And, that self-critical part of me can come back and say, what were you doing when you were 21 and asking these questions? You were so lost in your journey and what have you. But I honestly believe that it's that clarity throughout the different phases of our life and that the courage to try to understand who you are at each phase that kind of accumulates into this big moment of clarity. And, I'm very much on that path, very much on that journey personally. And I've made lots of mistakes along the way, but the commitment to being curious throughout my life is one of those qualities I just hold on to so strongly. But it takes a lot of courage to do this type of work and having somebody like Toby along the way and you, Chris, and different friends and family, is really the only way to, I think, truly make the change that you want to see. But yeah, I think this is a topic that we could talk about for hours. Chris, what about you? I mean, you always, I'm sorry.
Stu, just a second. Yeah, sorry, buddy. I, as you just said, one thing I want to also just from a definition of what the work might be, the work is also the process of doing the work. I think what you just said there really just resonated with me of it's not just also the chasing down these ideal outcome of showing up in the way in these roles that matter to us most. And that obviously is a place that we're headed or we want, to go, but it's also the investment. It's the purposeful investment in ourselves. That's the work. And so there's a piece to it that I want to just as I work with people and as you guys are working with the folks that you do, it's hey, did you invest in yourself? And that's part of the work. So we need to take the wins as we get them, and teaching ourselves to invest in ourselves is as much of a mountain as the outcomes that we desire. So just wanted to hit on that.
Powerful. Yeah, totally agree.
It's huge. Yes, Stu, you bring up a lot of good stuff, man. Just the curiosity, I think, is a huge component of the work. I get frustrated sometimes because I see a lot of my friends with just that lack of curiosity. I almost get envious in a way because it's like they seem happy, but yet they're not as open-minded to change and to doing becoming who they want to be. It's just, this is my life and I'm going to live it. And I guess that's okay to go through it. That's just not the way I want to do. You brought up ideal self a lot. I think I want to do the work in identifying who that ideal self is and the different roles that I play in my life. And that's when the work changes, right? Because there's been times that I've realized I haven't been the best son, right? And I have to go back to groundedness and get grounded and figure out, okay, well, what don't I like about who I've been? Who do I want to be as a son? And what's getting in my way? And that's kind of that's what we do, right? That's the fun part of our job. We get to do it ourselves, but we also get to help and guide other people to do it. So I just think for me, when you say the work, it's so many different things, right? I told you guys, I just did this, groundedness walk, and I wasn't liking who I was on just the health side of my life, right? And I eat plants. Yeah, great. So I just figured, I'm good. But as you get older, the other things are changing. You need to do other things. And I found myself kind of just feeling a little sorry for myself. And I used to do a lot of hard things and I just wasn't doing anything hard. So I'm like, hey, let me do something hard. So I took a long walk, let's put it that way. And in that moment, I was able to go inside. I had a lot of time in my hands to go inside and start to figure out who I wanted to be in that space of health and wellness, right? And realizing that as I get older, as life changes, my body changes, my health changes, I get older, the work changes and what I have to do changes. So it's this concept that I like about it, Toby. I don't know if you brought it, it's never over. It's always evolving. We evolve, our relationships with each other evolve. You talked about being 21-year-old and doing the work. I mean, the work back then was getting a cool car, and figuring out how I make enough money to support myself so I don't have to call mom and dad to help me out. It changes. Now I think we're so privileged, I think, and I'm so grateful for being, almost 50 and being this introspective for the next 50 years of my life and what I want to make out of it, and who I want to be as a grandparent. I don't want to rush that. I got a little bit, but or as an empty nester, you two, I'm lucky to have you guys in my life because what's my relationship with my wife when Tanner walks out the door 4 years from now? Is she going to look at me and be like, I don't really like you? I want to do the work now so that when Tanner walks out the door, we're walking out behind him going to Cabo and enjoying ourselves and enjoying each other's company. So that's why I think it's so important. And I think that's where the difference is with me and some of my friends, that it's I want to be super intentional so that when the time does come, that I could take advantage of it. For instance, my relationship with my wife. So yeah, I'm with you, Stu. It's so complex and so exciting when you have this intentionality and when you have the resources and the tools to understand how to do the work. Yeah. Right. And that's a lot about what we'll talk about with just getting grounded and understanding that concept, and then the ideal self and envisioning exercises and things like that and removing the obstacles. When you have that methodology, then it makes it easier, and and then when you start to see it come to life, like I am a lot in a lot of the aspects of my life, when you start to see the work actually turn into something, happiness, contentment, not fear, lack of fear. It's just super exciting and validating for me, Toby. And Toby, you're the one that introduced this to me, a long, long time ago, man. And it's been something that's just been an absolute foundation of my life right now. So I'm excited to talk about it, if you can't tell.
Yeah.
One thing, Chris, just to
Thanks, Chris.
Not stack, but to certainly complement what you just said. I don't know if you guys feel this way, but there's a big part of my story is about my experience as a child, right? And what I was exposed to in the environments. And, I think as children, we paint pictures on, and they may be accurate and they may not be. And there's, I had the opportunity to go interview both my parents. Chris, I know you did the same. And the whole intent behind that was to validate what was real and what was kind of a manufactured perspective of being a young kid. But my point in bringing this up is, for me, there's something about stopping some of the generational trauma, right? That has been passed down from my grandfather to my father and so on and so forth. And so part of it doing the work was, I want my children to experience something different than what I experienced. And not that there was any perfect answer to being a parent or to kind of living through the challenges of youth. But, I'm intentional, and I know you two are intentional about creating a positive impact and a positive ripple in the communities and in the families that we're a part of. And, that takes a commitment. That just doesn't happen. I talk to a lot of people that I love when they say, that's just who I am, right? That's just, and I'm like, or is it, that's just who you choose to be? Like, there is the option of better in life. And, now I think there's a fine line between also doing too much work. If I could take a stab here, where people, I have a daughter that manages some mental health and mental illness. And what she, after years of therapy, at some point she came back and said, look, if all I am doing is continuing to put myself in a position to talk about the past, it's real hard for me to see the future. It's real hard for me to manufacture and build the future. And it's like, sometimes there is that place of acceptance, right? And I think we're going to get into a word of surrender at some point, and just understanding that love of self, right? And realizing these are the qualities that, I may want to change, but they're really at the core of who I am as a human. And I want to celebrate those. But for me, there's a big part of this of wanting to change the generational trajectory of the families in my domain, or in the Ferguson name, right? And there's a lot of pride in that, of giving someone a role model or an example, especially a man that's committed and courageous enough to be vulnerable to do this type of work. And I think we need role models like that in our families and in our communities.
Well said.
That's a great point, Stu. I like what you said about, just like anything in life, there's an element of not enough and too much.
Yeah.
And we're always trying to find the in-between of those. And I think you're right. I think there's a small portion of people in my life that are they do work all the time. My wife's a great example of, I've never in my life met anybody that does the work she does on herself constantly. And she always laughs with, I'd love one day in my life that I wasn't wondering why I did what I did. And so it can be obsessive. It can be almost too much to that degree. Now, the benefit of it, right, for awareness of self and awareness and patience with course correcting and getting in alignment with who she wants to be in this life, and make sure that she's putting in the efforts to do so. Again, what an upside of that, and what that work really then results in is beautiful. But again, the other side of it, just like anything else. But that's the thing that I think we all have to just be mindful of also, is that whenever we're working on behavioral changes, our mind will play that game of worst case scenario. And it does that to keep us comfortable. And to that point, Chris, that you opened with, that miserably comfortable, most people stay there, not by choice. No one would sign up for a miserable life, but would someone sign up for a life that is uncomfortable? Most humans won't and don't. Yeah. And so, they'll choose misery. So, it brings me to the why to do this. I think, Chris, as you alluded to it, why would we do the work? And you and I, and I'm very grateful for the kind words you give me, but, you were willing to do the work, and you and I just had a container to do that. But why would you? I mean, most people, to my point, would sign up for happiness. Who wouldn't? And most people for their kids wouldn't sign up for happiness. So then what is it about this whole work thing and the concept of work? It seems tiring sometimes, even the word work. Here we go. I've got my lunch pail and I'm headed out the door. So from my experiences on the why, I think that, I'll first start with where I've seen a lot of people, and then a lot of my experiences with coaching it's really fear-based. The fear clicks them in. It's the fear of tragedy or crisis. And I know those are heavy duty words, but if I watered those down a little bit, and again, not to lessen them, but to to the point that I want to make of you get a health diagnosis, that all of a sudden, that you have to make the change and you have to work on yourself. That sometimes is enough. Sometimes it isn't, but sometimes it is. Maybe work related. I've worked with leaders before that have lost their teams because of their certain behaviors. And so they know now that their job's in jeopardy. So now the work then is putting on themselves of how do they show up as a better leader. Those get our attention, sometimes so profoundly that we do make a shift, right? We all know people in our lives, and maybe us included, that we changed. I mean, Chris, you changed your diet based on a lot of worries of what could be. And obviously I don't want to take your thunder there, but that's the kind of the click, the lightning bolt I like to call it of what happened. So that's there and will be for all of us. But the other side of it, why would we do it? What's the cost? What's the gain? And I've talked a little bit about comfort, and I've talked about that as well. But I think if we can paint the picture to ourselves about what do we get out of this work, and what will the end game be for us? And again, the happiness and the purpose and the meaning and the excitement that all could come with that. I think most people are aware of that, but it usually sometimes is not enough. And so that's where I think also bringing someone along with you on this work is very, very important as well. Is that I don't want to say no one could ever do the work by themselves, but if you're going to go after behavioral change, I think embedded in that is the necessity of having feedback.
Yeah.
So I just don't, how do you know, that you've changed unless someone tells you have, and that you might feel it, but you got to get some feedback on it. Sorry, Stu.
No, I think it's your quote. And I think it's so profound when you hear it, and it takes two people to see one. Right. Yeah. In many ways. And that, to that point about the behavioral part, it's, I have great intentions. That doesn't mean that my impact is equal to those intentions. Right. Yeah. And how do you connect that? Hey, I'm not to be devil's advocate, but again, to maybe challenge for a second this conversation, merely because this is, some of the brain work that goes on around that critical eye that we all possess. But, I've bumped into people, and I know you have too, that say, this is for the, that's soft stuff. That's the, that's the touchy feely stuff. I don't need that. I had a good upbringing. I'm close to my parents. My kids are great. My wife's great. I guess I don't need to do the work because everything's hunky dory here. There's the reality that some of the people listening to this may hear and say, hey, I'm self-aware. I read books. I go on walks. I eat vegetables, and I'm good. But, to that person, what's the advice in regards to maybe being at that place at this point in their lives, and that maybe that depth of awareness or lack thereof?
Chris, what are your thoughts? I have thoughts on it, but what hits you when you hear that? Because we've heard that before, all three of us. Totally. So that's a great point, Stu. Great point.
And where it's coming. I can see it coming a mile away. You can too. In a group setting, there's the individual in the back of the room, arms crossed, chest bowed out, and not taking a lot of notes, but throwing a lot of questions to challenge the concept of self-care, right? And so those are the ones, to be quite honest with you, that I relate to, because I found myself in that shoe. Even though I was open to change, I was skeptical. And to be quite honest with you, I was scared of being vulnerable. And there were other things at play here than the aesthetic of what I was sharing. And so, yeah, I'm just curious, how do we connect with that partner or that person in our life?
It's interesting, man. I my first thought there, Stu, is you don't. Right. Because the power, the work is a self-fulfilled journey or path, right? You have to want to do it yourself. You're the only one that can do it, and you can't force people to do it. And what I find later in my life now is I just want to hang out with like-minded and like-hearted people that are introspective and have done the work to figure out who they want to be and where they want to go in their life. Now, I think we can introduce concepts like groundedness and bring them through kind of value exercising and ideal. Who do you want to be in this life as a father, as a grandfather? I've actually used it on my dad, right? Like my dad and mom, they just kind of, they survived all their life. Like they don't know how to thrive.
Yep.
So they've just survived. So for me to be like, hey dad, who do you want to be as a grandpa? Like my kids fucking love you, dude. Like, but like when you're here, sometimes you're kind of not like, so like, who do you want to be? Like when you come, and I kind of like trick them into it, when you come to visit me, like, who do you want to be? And it's kind of like you're kind of tricking them into creating an intentionality and a small version of their ideal self in that moment. And then if you can compound those moments, right, and give validation, like, hey, on the way home, then be like, send them a text and be like, hey, Dad, Cindy, you guys were awesome this weekend. Yeah. I just want to let you know that. Like, you engaged my boys. Like, they absolutely loved you. Like, we laughed about this, blah, blah, blah. So when you give them validation, then it's like those little drops of whatever that say, oh, that was fun. Like, why don't I do that next time? And it takes a little work on my end, right? Yeah. To get them there, to kind of, I don't want to say trick them into doing the work, but tricking them into being intentional. But when they see that validation and that feeling inside, like, wow, I was a good pa on this trip. Totally. I was a good whatever on this trip. The same thing works for me. Like, I try to do that too. I'm going into July 4th weekend. Like, I have, like, I don't know how many July 4th I'm going to have with my parents. Like, that sounds super morbid, right? But like, that's the fact. Like, we all have that in common. Yep. We all have a certain amount of time. So I want to go into this weekend super intentional so that it's memorable, man. And I'm where my feet are, and we laugh and we get the most out of that time together, because I don't know. I mean, you do the math. There's not that many more July 4th that I'm going to be able to spend watching fireworks with my dad and mom on the boat and just enjoying it. And I know that time's going to come where I'm going to be out there by myself wishing that they were there. So how can I be this son in that respect that I want to be? But so I went astray there, Stu. But to answer your question, like, part of me is kind of like, shit, man, like, those are the people that frustrate the shit out of me, because like, I want to help them so bad. And and Toby's been helping me with that, because it's like, you can't change everyone, man, especially in this space. Like, they got to want to change, and I want to change everyone. And they have people have their own path, and I can try to get them there, but I got to be careful, because I have a certain amount of energy willing to give. Right. And if I keep giving it to people that don't want it, that's an empty road too. So anyway, I don't know if that answers your question. That was really well said.
How about you, Todd?
No, I think it's great. Listen, for starters, Chris, it's your superpower of motivating people from a space of being who you are. I just, in our work together, I just want you to keep being confident in that. Like, you do more being you than you do telling people to do this and to do that. There's no doubt in my mind of my relationship with you and the leader that you are. I think it gets back to leadership. Like, it gets back to leadership versus management. Our job's not to manage people to do the work, because by definition, they're not doing their work. I'm actually making them do their work, which doesn't ever work. Right? A lot of work's in that statement, but the leadership side is the modeling. Like, our job's to send out an invitation passively to the guy in the back of the room that we're here when you're ready. And to Chris's point, when you're ready to do the work, it will first start with your curiosity. You may not be all in, but you're curious enough to lean in. Hey, what are you guys talking about? Or what's your experiences with that? And the skeptics, I love them. I really do, because I like the challenge of, hey, I might not have it all figured out, or I might not be down the right road. I don't claim to, but like, this is my experiences with doing the work with people and their outcome, and my experiences with myself doing the work and continuing to do the work. And so I love what you said there, Stu, because it's true, especially from men specifically, this notion of, the feelings and my childhood. And I hear all the time, hey, I had a great childhood. I don't have a story, or I don't have anything to share. And I always scratch my head with that. It's like, it's your belief about what I mean by their rear view mirror. Right. The work is understanding your journey, your path here, understanding the good and the bad, And if you hadn't had a lot of bad, that's great. I mean, I'm not, yeah, but what's the good that you have? And you lean into the values that you gained and gleaned from those, and the love, the deep sense of purpose, yada, yada, yada. So there's a lot there that, if we can reframe, but it's an invitation. The three of us are about ready to walk on this path of invited people to come along with us. And we don't claim to be experts. That this path might change. We might go in a different direction 2 months from now because we've learned more about ourselves, or the people that come on this podcast, or the people we work with in our business. So it's an ever growing, ever learning moment for us. And that's part and parcel of the work for sure. So it's just something to keep thinking. And then the other side of it is, I always come from the point of view that human beings are meaning making and meaning seeking humans. And I think the three of us could realize and agree that it tends to hit those ones that are a little more elderly profoundly.
Oh, yeah.
And the big reason is that they can see the finish line. They know that their time on this planet. So as much as Chris is going to be intentional with his folks on this 4th of July, I'm hoping that his parents are also intentional with, I don't have a lot of time left. Yeah. So what a wonderful meet in the middle we are, that if Chris is doing the work of showing up like the son he wants to be, and his dad and stepmom are doing the work to get that direction as well, then what a moment of presence and groundedness, that we're all kind of doing our own things and we're coming at it in our own way, but we all seek meaning. And it's just the guy in the back corner is just not ready to go there yet, but he will. And to the point that was made earlier, can we do it before crisis? Can we do it before trauma? Can we do it in a way that the three of us aren't looking at each other, to Chris's point about joy in that relationship post the kids leaving the house? Regret is such a kick in the ass, and I hate it. I hate it from the point of view, I know how it feels. My dad passed a few years ago. I regret some of the words I didn't give him and say. Everyone's heard that story before. But again, if we could live so intentionally on purpose with the work that we stave off some of the regret we'd have, again, another reason why to do it. And that's really kind of, it's one thing to define, it's another thing why to do it. And that would be another reason for me to just, hey, maybe I'll sign up for this because I want to live a life seeking meaning and finding meaning about myself and where I'm headed, but also not living with the regret of the convo I wished I would have had.
So well said. I bring that question up because I've got, and I know you guys do too, there's some people in my social circles that I'm excited to sharing of what we're building, what we're doing. And what's interesting is, some of the pushback you end up getting around the curiosity of self, right? And I've been one of those A-type personalities at different parts of my career and my life. I have been the alpha. I've tried to be the alpha, assuming that was the ideal self. And what regardless of where I wasn't in a place of evolution. I was in a place of comfort and fear and locking into this version of who I am. And that curiosity of ideal self, I just keep coming back. And I know I brought it up a bunch here, but there's so much power in calling your shot in where you want to evolve to. And those people that are striving for success or striving high performing individuals, deep down, there's that goal of creating that ideal self. And there's such a way to get people re-engaged because if not, then we die out, right? You just kind of plateau at a level of understanding of self and others. And life is going to move beyond that. The world is going to evolve beyond that. And so you may be an alpha today, but will you be in 15 years, right? When your kid's 13, you might be great right now with an infant, but when your daughter enters middle school, you will be challenged far different than you were previously. And so that idea of what is the ideal self look like as life changes, I think that should humble anybody that's feeling that they've got it all figured out, because we don't. And life's going to continue to show us that we don't.
Yeah, that's great. That's very well said. Anything to add there to Chris? I'm also thinking about just kind of I would suggest, and with regards to anyone out there that is interested in starting that, and we can kind of share our own experiences of how we started doing that, or what some of those guidelines, and we've probably given a few of them already, but just to kind of summarize a bit to, hey, those of you that are interested in more so of getting busy, getting to the work, just to give them an outline. But any other thoughts, Chris, on the topics that we've hit and some of the areas around the work?
No, I love this. I love having this conversation with you guys. I love that people are listening to it and hopefully going in a little bit introspective and figuring that out, Toby. But I think let's move towards that, because I think that's what everybody's kind of waiting. Like, how do you do it? Like, that's what I always, and how do you do it when you're in survival? Like when you worked with me as an executive, I was in survival a lot when I was an executive, because it wasn't who I wanted to be. Right. I mean, from God, I loved it. I did well at it, but it wasn't really who I wanted to be in this life. And it took me a little while to finally have the courage to say, all right, hey, that was a good round. Let's go do something else. But like, how do you do the work while you're in survival mode? And I think that was my struggle. If you were my client, like I was yours, like I probably would have struggled with me a little bit. Right. Because I was doing a lot of the work,
Toby
but like,
did.
Was I really?
He just didn't admit it.
Yeah, he admitted it sometimes too. Toby was very honest with me. He trusts me. But, let's get into that, man. Cause I think it's a lot of the people that are going to be listening to this are those, people that may not be in a place that they may be just surviving versus, and will this catapult them towards more of that thriving, which it did for me. So let's get into it, buddy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that, and obviously you guys keep chiming in on your own experiences with it, but I think it's now more than ever from and again, I haven't been at it for 50 years, but the last, 15 years or so of working with people and as coaching people, I think we're more aware of ourselves than I've ever seen anybody, like a population be. So, from the countless numbers of, performance and analytics that are used at corporations and whatnot, from 360s to assessments of various, we have so much more data coming at us about, how we're showing up. And I think we're aware of that. I think that the work, though, really, because that's one thing. It's like, hey, I know I do this, or I run from that, or Chris, to your point, I know I'm surviving. Okay. So, but how do we look at it from the point of view of, like, again, not great judgment, but just say, okay, I'm in a survival state. And this is that rear view mirror analogy again of just like, let's just take note of it. I'm surviving because this is how I got here. This is what I know about myself, or what's been provided to me. And I've now kind of reflected on that. And so now what? Now, what do I want to do with that understanding? And some of it is to take it to a deeper level of understanding, like what's under some of those behaviors that you might not be aware of. So there, you may find yourself, and some really would roll their eyes of, I don't want to spend all this time in the rearview mirror. You can't drive a car. You're correct. You can't. But if you're not aware of how you got here, and again, kind of taking some further, as coach would say, unpacking of the survival. So is this something that you've probably survived for 10 years and you didn't realize it? You just got this information yesterday. And why do you think some of those things have happened? And there's various numbers of reasons, and there's things that you can, take from that. Or it might be more recent, like I'm in a new job and I'm surviving in this job. And so now it's more the recent future, if you will. And so spending some time to do that is part of the work. That's why it's always kind of a twofer for me. It's that rearview mirror of understanding where I am and how I got here, and then building the plan and having a vision for where you'd like to go and where you'd like to take it. And most people, again, they would come and say to me, hey, I'm pretty EQ centric. I know who I am and what I am. And I smile a bit because I'm like, hey, it hasn't been my experiences that people spend a ton of time here. But many of them do, though. Like some of them, because of the amount of data that I just referenced, they have great awareness. So, but the key is, what then do you do with this? What are you going to do in this moment with this information about yourself and this emotional intelligence that you now have? Because it's awareness and management of the emotions would be your EQ kind of branches for self. But then where do I want to go and how do I want to get there? And it can feel very, very overwhelming. That's why, again, I think, occupational hazard, but I think coaches really, really can help people in that regard to just walk with them. And we may spend time backwards, and I say backwards, but looking backwards, we may spend time with where you are today and then where you are tomorrow. But that's our philosophy, is that you're going to have to hit all three, and you may have to go back to one to get to forward to the other. And that's why it's a lifelong journey. But to get people excited about that, I think we just need to let's try to simplify it and make it a process, but simplify also the work itself is easy or simple, but not easy. And that's really, and attaching an individual's want to do that work is the tricky part. But again, it's about them and it's not about me. So it's just keep reframing where they are with their lives and what they want out of it. So that might be a little more tactical than we needed, but that's kind of the process I would take with regards to, this concept of the work, the introduction of it, what's at stake with it, and then inviting people to play in those sandboxes with us about where they are.
Agreed.
Stu, what do you think about all of that? Like your experiences with that work? And
I think really well said. I think one of the things that you worked a lot on me with is being able to articulate, what do you need? What as an individual on this journey of doing the work, articulating to the people that love you and support you around you, what you truly need in return of doing that work. Right. And it's not, this is probably a personality flaw at some level, but internally I am moving Mount Everest. When you start to do the work, I am moving the pyramids of my life internally, right? And then externally, for the audience to not be able to see the sausage getting made and be able to validate that the work is being done, to be able to look at my wife and say, hey, this is where I am right now. And this is what I'm trying to improve on. And hey, buddy, these are a couple of things I need you to validate with me. Right. And to be able to articulate and kind of call in some of the reserves to help shepherd you, because like we said earlier, and, it takes two people to see one. And I think to do the work, to call on these allies to help you is incredibly important. And, the other thing is, I think we get caught up a lot of times when we say we're doing the work is we start working on the symptom and not the root cause. And a lot of times we want to fix feeling lonely, right? Without digging deep enough to find out the cause of loneliness, right? So we're going to talk in another episode about loneliness. And one of them is, I've experienced that. And what did I do? I ran out and stopped being lonely. I got a lot of people in my life. The problem was they were the wrong people, right? And so to be able to get to the root of that work. And for me, it's a really cheesy practice, but for me, I go why 5 times. I ask myself why, I answer it. I ask myself, why is that the case? And keep going until I get to a point, honestly, where I'm emotionally impacted with the answer. With the answer stops me in my tracks. Usually that is the root of where a lot of my pain lies or where that work needs to be. So again, it's, not getting frustrated with misdiagnosing yourself, right? And choosing a symptom instead of the root cause is part of doing the work. And a lot of times you got to enter into that symptom to be able to get to the core of really where that pain lies. And so again, for me doing the work, it's about, what do I need in the cavalry around me being able to help me continue on the path? And then making sure that I'm not chasing fool's gold on symptoms that are easy to talk about. Symptoms tend to be very easy to communicate about, be vulnerable about, but the root of that symptom is something that we tend to put in the shadow. And that's, I think, a lot of the work Toby's talking about is how do we move those things into the light? How do we move those things into a consumable place to be able to do the work and chip it away? And, the last thing is I want monumental shifts in my life when I am doing the work. I want to wake up in the morning for everybody to see how hard I've worked. The reality is we have to remember where we came from and the trust that we have either broken or that we have yet to earn around our ideal self. And so for me, it's also about a lack of judgment of others and making sure that you understand that this is your journey and your path and you've got to do the work. But, I don't know if that helped, but I definitely feel very convicted around the fact that I chased symptoms for years, and I waved the victory flag more times than not, because I thought I was a little deeper, a little wiser, a little more aware than maybe somebody else. But when I really sat with that symptom, it was clear to me that there was something far deeper that I was yet to tackle. So what about you, Chris?
Yeah, good stuff, Stuart. Like, I mean, you said so much in there that like resonates with me too. For me, the real piece for me in doing the work was finally getting really honest with myself and who I was. And that's a moment, right? When you're really, really honest with yourself, because you're the only one that can really be honest. And I played the game for so long and told myself I was happy and put on a smile. And you guys know I'd walk into a room and be the happiest guy in the room. And I would, probably more so, the tears of a clown type of thing. Yeah. Right. But yet inside, I wasn't who I really wanted to be in a lot of different places of my life. One of the stories that resonates with me, it's actually in my book. That's going to be coming out sometime. Come on. I was on a plane after a long week meeting. I think we were in Arizona or something, Stu, and drank too much, partied too much, didn't take care of myself, had a blast, right? But I got home and my flight was canceled. So then they put me on a standby. It's the perks of being an executive. You get points. They get you home somehow. But I ended up on like row 36B, right? And I roll back there and there's two very larger gentlemen sitting and I'm in the middle row and I'm just like, oh man, this is going to be such a long ride, but I had downloaded a video, right? And I downloaded a video, and it was a conversation we had earlier in the week. I overheard someone talking about the Tony Robbins video, and the video was the movie, I'm Not Your Guru. And it was just such a weird moment, man. I sat down and I couldn't sleep as much as I wanted to. So I'm like, let me start this video. So I started listening to it. In 10 minutes, I'm bawling. Like, dude, bawling. And I was so embarrassed, but I didn't really care because I was so tired. And it was just like this moment that I probably shouldn't say I was embarrassed, because I really didn't give a shit, that I was like, literally like couldn't catch my breath crying. And it was because he started the movie about his relationship with his mom. And his mom was abusive, verbally, physically, but yet she's like in the video, in the background with him. Like he has this unbelievable relationship with him. And in that moment, he said, I don't blame my mom. Like she did what she did. Like, yeah, like probably some of the shit wasn't great stuff. Like you shouldn't beat your kid up or verbally abuse your kid, right? Like it's probably not that, but she's probably not that proud of that.
Right.
Yeah. For parenting. Yeah. You probably shouldn't do that stuff, but she's why I am where I am today. Like those experiences that I had in my life kind of shaped who I was today. And in that moment, I just realized that I was being a victim in so many places in my life, with my relationship with my mother, in my relationship with my wife, having to travel, having to do that. I always had an excuse for everything. I had an excuse for everything with my behavior. Well, I was drinking too much, or I was traveling, or it's this, I'm the bread, blah, 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 blah. And I wasn't truly owning who I was or who I wanted to be. And in those tears, and the big dude next to me was super nice. He hit my leg and asked me if I was okay. And I said, yeah, I'm okay. These are good tears. These are good tears. And it was that was one of those marker moments for me that I started doing the work, Toby, like the real work, like starting to figure out what is the relationship with my mom and why was that impacting me in so many other parts of my life, like with my relationship with my wife and the abandonment issues that I had. Like, let's start dealing with that. And I think it's important for us to say too, there's a slippery slope in the work, right? Being therapeutic and counseling and coaching, right? Like there is a moment where you might need to go and talk to, and that's okay too, man, especially when you're looking in the rearview mirror. So like, we're not going to have all the answers for you in any way, shape or form. So you might need additional help. And I did. I had to go talk to somebody. I had to go unpack that rearview mirror. I was stuck there. And in those conversations and unfolding and starting to take control of my life, like that's when I realized who I wanted to be. That's when I started those visioning exercises of who I wanted to be with that relationship that I had with my mom, who I wanted to be with my relationship with my wife and my kid, blah, blah, blah. And I got to work. And since then, it's been fun. So you have that breakdown moment. And then I think that's the groundedness, right? That's the power of that groundedness and that, like, unfortunately for me, it was through, Tony Robbins. I don't know. Well, fortunately or unfortunately, I don't know. But on a plane, in front of people. But
maybe he'll hear this and come on our podcast. That would be great.
There you go. Hey, that'd be pretty cool. That'd be pretty cool. And since then I followed him, and this is the stuff he talks about, man. Like taking control of your life and stop being a victim. And that is the work. Like he speaks and talks about the work. So I just think it's so deep, Tobe. There's so many aspects of this. It shows up in so many different ways in your life. And I think when you surrender to life, and life will smack you, it will show up and it will say, hey, there is work to do here. Yeah. Like, so now whether you listen to it, and that depends on kind of where you are. And there's been a lot of times that I've been smacked that I didn't listen to it, but it will catch up to you. Like it will in one way, shape or form. So, hopefully through these, listening to this and potentially partnering with us, like we can get you to listen to the indicators of life that are smacking you in the face, so that you can take advantage of it and get to work. So hope that helps.
Hey, Chris, just to parlay, one of the things you just said that resonated with me, and it comes back to actual coaching I got from Toby a few years ago, and it was, Toby, you may reword it and how I lay this out, but it was a conversation about take some stock in where your conflict points are in life. Like, both internally and externally. And that was a very healthy practice for me internally, because I had a lot of conflicts between who I am and who the ideal self. Like there was a lot of turmoil there, but there was also conflicts with my wife and with my kids and with my parents and with my friends. And those conflicts, instead of looking at them as just conflicts, they were kind of an alarm bell for me to get curious. Like what is creating that conflict or that collision, and what role do I have in it? Now, I get to a place sometimes where I overanalyze things, and Toby can certainly validate that on not just this call, but every call we have. I have a tendency to do that, but
no.
But what I found were those collisions, right? Those things that were creating some tension in my life. To back to your point of listening, like there are some very obvious things that we're living through. I had a coaching session yesterday with someone, and I asked him, I said, do you ever feel like you find yourself in that spin cycle? Like where everywhere you look is chaos, like nothing is grounded, nothing is stable. And he was like, that's where I am right now. And I just asked him, I said, what role do you have in that? Like, what role do you have in creating that spin cycle? Good question. To hear him go through what he is doing to those conflict points, about 50% of them went away pretty quick once he realized what his contribution was to it. He was like, shit, I don't want this with my brother. I don't want this with my sister. Right. And so that ability to own it in a healthy way. But I would just encourage people to, back to Chris's point about listening, it's also seeing, right? There's the collision that you're watching in your life, and get curious about that. That's okay. That's super healthy. What's unhealthy is when you obsess on it to the point to where it changes your ideal self or who you are today, right? And that curiosity is powerful, but it can be, for me, I overuse the critical eye, which again, we'll hear more about throughout this, but those collision points are windows into who we are and what we stand for, and where those values might be colliding with the world outside of us.
I love it. It's great. Well, hey, one last thing I have to say, and I'll pass it to you, Chris, to kind of wrap us up. But I think you said something that really is profound, Chris, that again, very simple, but not easy. And that's telling the truth on ourselves. Mm-hmm. Everybody wants to know, how do I get started? What do I need to do? What is this whole concept of the work? I get it. I know myself. I also have a plan for where I want to go, but how do I start? Tell the truth. Tell the truth about yourself. And that doesn't just mean, because I think there's a quick connotation to all of your demons, all of your weaknesses, all of your flaws. Telling the truth doesn't have a positive or negative. It just is what it is. Tell the truth on yourself, on how brilliant you are, how wonderful you are, where your intentions lie, and how you're trying to show up in the ways that you really do in this world, in this life, in this moment in time that you have. But tell the truth. Tell the truth about the journey. What was great about it, and who showed up impactfully for you, and what marker moments were not great for you, and who didn't show up for you. And that's the truth. And where you are today, what's the truth about how you're showing up? And not the aspirational truth, the truth. And then ultimately, where do you want to go, and where do you want to take this? What's the truth on that? And so again, just it sounds simple, but it's very difficult. And for those of you out there that, hey, I'm all in and all of that, but then you get, writer's block as you journal, ask yourself, what do I need to tell my truth? So what do I need to do for myself to tell my truth? Some of it is you got to give yourself grace. And that's a hard thing to do, but some of us need to do that and be patient with ourselves and have enough, just in that moment, enough self-love to just say, I'm going to start walking this path. I'm going to take a very big step, and I'm going to tell the most scariest person in the world what my truth is, and that's me. But I can build on truth. You can build on truth. We can build on truth. It's when we try to build this thing on bullshit that we find that it doesn't work. We want the wrong way. It wasn't all of those things that usually happen. You usually got to go back to the beginning and say, when you first started the work, were you honest with yourself? Find that out. And if you can figure that out, boy, we're on the right road. You're on the right road, more importantly, and take some people with you.
Wow, I love that, dude. Nice job. Thanks for walking us in, Toby. And then just to reiterate, this is going to be our conversation that we have with guests. Right? What the work is for them, because it's different for everyone. Shameless plug. We are building a program, a 6-month program, journey to walk with you on. And the foundation of that program is around this and groundedness and finding your truth and getting real with it and understanding it, and then kind of walking you towards the obstacles that you're facing in your life and why they keep showing up and getting through them. It'll culminate in a retreat. We're looking to have a cohort of sorts to find tribes and things like that. But this is some of the discussion that we're going to have on a monthly basis. So more to come on that. Follow us on, the socials and all the websites and all the fun stuff. You'll be seeing a little bit more about that, but a little bit of a shameless plug, but we're all really excited about bringing this to the market for like-minded and like-hearted people that want to go on this path with each other and do the work. So anyway, hey, I wanted to really thank you guys for joining us on the path today. Remember, every journey is unique. Every step you take shapes that journey. Keep exploring, stay curious, and give yourself grace, as Toby said, as you forge your path and do your work. Until next time, stay true to yourself and keep walking the path. Thanks, guys.